What I have here is the disassembled master cylinder from my 1977 MGB. We had lost brake pressure on the last outing, and I immediately suspected it was the master cylinder, so I took it home and disassembled it. I found that one of the seals had gone bad. After cleaning everything up, the bore was in pretty good shape, so I honed it out. Just use a little Marvel mystery oil to get a nice clean honing inside that cylinder. Put a dab of oil on each stone and a little more in the bore, and then worked it a couple times. It came out very clean with just a little effort. After I was satisfied with the bore, washed it out with brake parts cleaner, and then proceeded to order a rebuild kit. So if you watched some of my older videos, you can see the camera was always vertical, and because I used to make car repair videos for Instagram, but now that I'm posting on YouTube, I'm going horizontal. You'll also notice I had a pretty decent garage to work in, and that's no longer the case because we're now living in a temporary situation because we're building a house, and I'll show you where that's going to go here in just a second. So you'll get a look at the new Southern Roads garage, and it will be located about where that pile of trees is. That's got to get burned, and we're going to develop the land and build a house with a new garage there. Well, I have everything more or less laid out the way it goes back into the master. I am replacing this brake light sending unit. These are notorious for sticking and having to be forcibly removed from the master cylinder. This was just rusted in place, and I got pretty aggressive trying to get it out. The new one will go in with a little bit of good old-fashioned never sees. Hopefully we won't have this issue of breaking the part off again. Also got a seal kit from Moss to aid in the installation, a little bit of silicone grease to lube these up as I put them together. So I have this thing attached to a vise. I'm going to go ahead and set up this universal bleed kit. Should have the right fittings to go in here. We'll run the tubes in with the check valves on the end, and that ought to take care of this until we can actually do the bench bleed. We have the master set up to bleed. We'll put fluid in here, move the pistons with a rod. That'll force the air out back into the reservoir where it'll rise up, just go away. Once we're bled, I can take this to the car, we'll get it bolted on. Then we'll have to bleed out the entire brake system. Well, good morning. It is the next morning, and I'm ready to mount the master back on the car. We have the car here at an off-site storage where I'm forced to work on it in ultra low light conditions, so it's very hard to get good video on this, but that's where that master's going to stab in for the time being. I do have it bled. I bench bled it and then set it up in this bucket on some towels so that it wouldn't tip over on the way over here, because you know I don't really want to disconnect the lines and get air back into it. I want to leave those on until I'm ready to plug in. So I just kind of have it set up where it's not disturbed for right now. So I'm going to go ahead and stab this in off camera just because the light conditions make it hard to film anyway. So we are 2 hours later, still not installed. It's been on and off the car twice. I'm having a problem with the rear piston is not springing back, and after one cycle of the pedal it won't pull back enough to pull in fluid, so I can't bleed the rear end of the circuit. I'm gonna have to take this back home, take it apart again and double check it. See why that's not springing back, because until then it just won't build brake pressure. As it turns out, I was never going to get that master cylinder mounted because the flare nut inside the car for the driver's side front brake line was stripped. And upon further inspection of the master cylinder, I found out that the threads in the master were torn up as well. So the original master won't go back in the car, and I'm going to have to remove this driver's side brake line. Now, I've got the parts on the way from Moss. So today I'm going to pull the old line out. When the new line comes in, I'll bend it to match, and then we'll move on. I was very fortunate. I was able to get the brake line out without much fuss or fettle. I'm going to save the clips. Then I'm going to use the old line to pattern the new one, which is coming in a few days. And we'll meet you back here when it's all ready to go back together. It's now a week later, and I have the master cylinder and the new brake line. I went ahead and pre-bent the brake line I got from Moss, and I have to say it was very easy to work with. I had a very ancient and basic hand bending tool. I was able to use that to bend the tubing to match. I think I've got it pretty close. So let's see how easy it is to get it reinstalled onto the car. The most difficult part was always going to be getting this little bracket right back into place. I do see the little hole that it goes into. Let me see if I can get it back in there. Yep. All right. Kind of fiddly working around the camera, but I think we've got it so far. Right. Well, that went in easier than I thought it would. You know, these are near each other on the master. I think we'll be able to stab the master in. The only thing, there's nothing but air in here, so I'm going to try to flood this with brake fluid. So I'm going to undo that bottom bolt, see if I can't put some brake fluid in this before we put the master in and reduce the amount of air I have to bleed out of the system. I've loosened the fitting all the way to about half a thread. The theory is that if I use a syringe to put brake fluid in the line, the air will push out, and I see drips here. Tighten it back up, And then I can remove the syringe, and then we can come in with the bled master. So I have drawn up into this syringe a volume which I think will be more than enough to flood that brake line. We'll go ahead and place this on the upper end of the line and try to force fluid out through that fitting. So that line is bled out. I'm going to go grab the master. We'll get it bled, try to stab it on the car again. Well, that was a workout. It was all two hands on deck and a lot of bad body positioning to get that in there. But I think we're in. I'm going to go and check to see if we got pedal. If so, I'm going to get this home. I'm going to bleed all four corners. I was able to bleed the four corners out pretty well. Since I had the car on 4 jack stands, I decided to go ahead and do some chassis maintenance. Over here you can see there's one grease nipple on the forward spine connection. And I'm just going to pump about 8 squirts of grease into there. I also tightened up that barrel adjuster that is just to the left of that nipple that tightens the emergency brake cable. I took that little bow of slack out for better cable engagement. There are 6 grease nipples on the front end, 3 on each kingpin. They are very, very difficult to squeeze grease into because of the tight tolerances. I definitely recommend one of these locking grease fittings. These are often neglected fittings on MGBs, and it often results in very loose and dangerous front ends. And there we got a little grease coming out through the bottom there. That's perfect. Next, I decided to bleed out the clutch. The fluid had never been changed in the 18 months we've owned the car, and the fluid was a terrible color. I used a syringe to pull the old fluid out. As you can see, it's very dark and metallic. Yeah, that is very old clutch fluid there. In goes a little funnel. These masters are in a tight corner, pretty hard to get to. Take some time not to spill any brake fluid on the paint. You just have to be careful right here. I then set up the slave cylinder for bleeding. If you've worked with these in the past, you notice a problem right away. As I found out from one of our club mechanics, the clutch line and the bleeder nipple are in the wrong holes. They need to be reversed. Several club members have told me that the clutch slaves come in the box incorrect. As you can see, I'm about to get some very old black fluid out of the slave. And unfortunately, the line did not have a copper washer. The threads were messed up. We were never able to bleed it properly. So we've got the new one on the way. After I bled out the clutch and found out that it wasn't going to work the way I wanted, I ordered those parts, and then I moved on to some other adjustments, mainly the rear drum brakes. The passenger rear drum brake was pretty loose, so I got back there and turned the adjustment screw about half a turn to get it to grab where I wanted. No, I do not have the proper square wrench to do this. I just use an adjustable wrench, and I'm very careful not to booger up the adjustment. And with that, this car is ready for its next road trip, which I hope to see you on soon on Southern Roads.